Are we live? Are we live? Are we live? Let us know if we're live. Are we live? 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 Live? Are we live? Let us know, people. Try out if we are live. Let us know in the chat if we're live. Anyways, what's going on? It's myself, Bobby Skinner, and then the Football Grump of the Just Giants podcast. All right, people are saying we're live. Live.
Sounds like we're live.
I want to put a more emphasis on live streaming in the off season, and that's a good way for us to have guests on, because it's like the podcast is twice a week. We're hitting topics, and it's like we forget to like talk to people. So, and you're going to be at the Senior Bowl with us next week. Are you excited to go down to Alabama?
It's I guess my second favorite state in the United States, right? Yeah, I'm stoked. It was a lot of fun last year. It was kind of last year was your second time being there, right?
Yeah, so this year is my third time. The first year I was there, I was by myself. There wasn't a lot of people there because it was COVID. It was a weird year. Yeah, I think last year was more of like what it actually is on a consistent basis year to year.
Yeah, but it was also like it was my first time there, so my head was kind of swimming. It felt like we were playing catch up with all the possible things that we could do and wanted to do. Whereas like now I feel like I understand what the situation is on like a day by day basis, and I feel more prepared for this. So I'm really excited this year.
Yeah, it's definitely more prepared going to it the second time. I feel much less prepared because the Giants had 2 weeks of playoff games, and I am just like, it's just such a turnaround where it's like I'm trying to catch up on like things that I've been needing to do personally that I've been neglecting because of the Giants, and it's now it's like, okay, all right, but we got to get ready for the Senior Bowl. So I've been cranking away. And we could do a little Senior Bowl talk towards the end, but I wanted to have you on it and we talk through like the awards, because I don't want to do Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley conversations all night. But I do want to start with some questions before we get in. What was just instant reaction to like the New York Giants 2022 season? Like, what did you start off your pod talking about? If it wasn't necessarily just like the Eagles game.
Well, we actually spent like very little time on the Eagles game itself. And I think part of that has to do with the Saturday night game. Like you have that whole day Sunday to watch football games that don't mean anything to you to kind of calm down. Because like if we, for whatever reason, drew the 49ers in that divisional round and lost, I think I would have been totally like just completely fine leaving the watch party and just in a good mood. And I was in a fair spirits when we left anyway. But I mean, that Philly like stink just from that loss was like enraging. So we didn't talk much about that game, and that game was an absolute blowout. And there was like some coaching things in there I really didn't like, but we both took a step back and it was like, this was crazy. I mean, going back. So think about this last year, talking kind of about the Senior Bowl and stuff. Remember, we were trying to cram Senior Bowl actual stuff in with like coaching hires and like crazy news stories and stuff like that. Like I really didn't expect us to be anything remotely considered competitive towards the stretch this year. I thought our season would probably be over a little bit after Thanksgiving. This was not only just unexpected, but it was just good to feel like part of a real football team again, didn't it? Like it just felt good that like every week I wanted to know what else was happening around the league to like kind of position ourselves. I never expected to be in that situation. So it was just really nice to feel like I was part of the NFL again.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy how like Senior Bowl week last year was what? Monday was Brian Dable opening press conference. And then it's like, okay, Patrick Graham's going to be back. Then Mike Kafka's hired, and then Patrick Graham gets bothered by some things and decides to go to Vegas. It was just like, okay, like this is all right. Now we got Mike Kafka, we got Bobby Johnson. Now it's time to get a defensive coordinator.
I'm pretty sure you spent like 2 hours just doing like Bobby Johnson stuff one night.
Yeah, I remember I was literally sitting across from you, like watching a Bobby Johnson like O-line clinic, trying to like kind of get a grasp of like what this guy's all about.
Which, by the way, there were definitely nights where we had fun down there, but that was about an hour of you and I sitting in near complete silence working.
Yeah, that's basically
Yeah.
It's like, oh, look, this. Okay, all right, back to work.
Cool. Writing.
That was Monday. Monday is supposed to be like the chill, just get ready for the weekday, and we're just like, nope, let's grind out some, O-line coach stuff. I will be interested to see if there is any, like, you usually have some type of position coach turnover. Now obviously that would happen if Mike Kafka were to get the Texans job or any job.
Are you
But
worried about that?
a little.
You're a little worried about it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like terrified. How scared are you that Mike Kafka is gone this year?
On a scale of 1 to 10 of me thinking he's gone, I would put it right down the middle of 5 or 6, because this is a team that was trying to hire Josh McCown.
Yep.
So, they can go after, the young cat who doesn't have a ton of experience, but he does have actual experience and you can hire him. Worried about losing Mike Kafka, I would put out a 4, because I definitely don't want to lose Mike Kafka, but this is the Brian Daboll offense. Like, Mike Kafka came into the Giants building. It was Brian Daboll, Shea Tierney, the QB coach, and Bobby Johnson, the O-line coach. Those guys like taught Mike Kafka the offense that they were running, and obviously Mike Kafka calls the plays and added, they merged some stuff from Kansas City in there too. So I because it's Brian Daboll's offense, I wouldn't panic. Like, losing Wink, it's like, yeah, we could promote Drew Wilkins, but guys don't always run the same stuff. So
I could kind of picture Irsay hiring Wink too.
Me too. That's the one team that I'm like, I can see it. But they're interviewing like 10 different people. So
I know. Carolina too, which is weird. They're hiring everybody, and they have an interim head coach that took a failing roster and brought them to playoff contention. It's kind of weird. Although I think Steve Wilkes got a second interview today.
Yeah, anyway. But it's the interim coach like never lasts. I'm trying to think of when they had Romeo Crennel in Kansas City, Garrett in Dallas.
Yeah, and that was a while, but that's also kind of because he's a wet blanket, right?
Yeah, and they wanted Jason Garrett. I think he already wanted Garrett to be the head coach, and Garrett kind of undermined Wade Phillips a little bit. Anyways, but I wanted to go through the awards just to kind of get some stuff to talk about besides talking about Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley contracts, because I want to do live streams all off season, but I do not want to have to answer that question, do that topic time after time. Like, I want to just I want to do one podcast talking about what guys do we bring back. So Big Blue VCR, Marty Schottenheimer's interim coach in Cleveland in 1984. I did not know that. So the awards I want to spend the least amount of time on: offensive and defensive most outstanding player. Who would be them for you?
Defense, I think, is not even a question. It's got to be Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, easily.
I mean, he had an all-pro season, and statistically, I think he was better than Aaron Donald in a lot of categories. So I don't really think that warrants a whole bunch of explanation. 32 QB hits, I think something like 36 hurries, 7.5 sacks. I mean, those are great numbers for defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive was one of the we let the listeners vote. Just give your ballot on all. It was Dexter Lawrence got like 280 votes. Or whatever it was, and the rest got a combined 3. Adoree Jackson, Leonard Williams, and Julian Love each got 1 vote.
That's interesting. Well, okay, so you had this as most outstanding player. So if it were valuable, I would think that you could make a compelling case for Adoree Jackson based on how bad they looked without him.
Yeah. If Adoree played all year, he could have been in the conversation for most outstanding. But
I would agree with that. But he missed such a huge chunk of time too.
Yeah. And Adoree is like as great as a corner as he doesn't get interceptions, and interceptions are valuable. They're not the best way to you don't judge a corner off of interceptions, but they just bring more shine to your name.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he also doesn't get credit for all his run support or screen support as well,
which he was great at this year.
He was very good at it this year.
From the first drive of the Titans games, like, man, Jackson is playing the run this year. Who would you put on for offensive? I think it's an easy answer, but you can make an argument for 2 other people.
I would say it's tough between 3 guys, and I'm thinking that we have all 3, right? It's Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, and Andrew Thomas.
Right.
I think and quite frankly, it's just your perspective. I went Barkley on this one.
Oh, wow.
But I could probably convince myself as I talk about this for both of the other 2 guys. But Barkley played in every single game. And while that might be a feat for him personally, I think in today's NFL for a running back, that's just a feat in and of itself. And on 295 attempts, he had 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. He had 57 catches on 76 targets for like another 400 yards almost. And he didn't look like the rookie version of himself where it was like 3 yards, 2 yards, -1 yard, 81 yards, and that was like his stats for the game. He had a productive and efficient year that totaled up to these big numbers. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but also importantly, and not talked about enough, I would say he really improved his pass blocking, where that was like, without a doubt, the worst aspect of his game coming into this year. I didn't even think that it was like, I was more worried about other things with him running the ball, dancing behind the line of scrimmage, maybe just staying healthy. I wasn't really concerned about his pass blocking. So for him to have even improved on that, I think warranted it for me. But you could make a case for the all-pro left tackle easy. And I love him just as much as you. So,
And that's why we always name it most outstanding, is like, I think Thomas is just a more outstanding at his position than Saquon Barkley is. And Saquon Barkley had a kind of a cold stretch. When the offense was at its best was when it was less put in his hands. And like, he had a great start to the season on those first 6 games, but it really, if you look at it after that, there was some drop off, and then his efficiency went up when they started involving him a little more in the receiving game. So, but yeah, I would have actually put Daniel Jones second after Andrew Thomas, because with the receiving core that he had, they weren't a good handoff team for about half the season, right? Like, for half the season, they were not good at just handing the ball off. And he just played almost perfectly. Like, obviously no one plays perfect, but like, it was just like, he was flawless all season long. Like, you go watch the film and you're not being like, this. There'd be like 2 plays a game max of like, oh, he should have done this. And even on those plays, sometimes they'd end up being like 12, 15-yard gains anyways. So I would go, but to me, Thomas was just the most outstanding at what he does. So that's why I want him. Trey says he can't wait for the offseason. Brother, you ain't got to wait. We are here.
We are here.
All right. Here, what are the other awards that we have?
Well,
These are, I think it's a little more interesting.
Underrated, improved, underwhelming, and rookie of the year. Which do you want first?
Most underrated got 25 votes from our listeners. 25 people got voted most underrated. Listeners went Julian Love. And actually, it's funny. So Julian Love, when we tweeted out that he won most underrated by the listeners, he quote tweeted and said, "Talking Giants first the world."
I saw that last night.
Very cool.
Super cool.
That was very cool. But in my head, I'm like, I kind of got into the listeners for voting Julian Love most underrated, because I don't think he's underrated. And it's not like a knock on him. I just don't think he's underrated. I think he's rated pretty properly. Maybe after that last Eagles game where he played really bad, he could be underrated, because that game leaves a taste in people's mouth, and that's they'll just say that's who he is.
Yeah. Okay. So he had a bad game against the 1 seed.
Yeah. But it was funny. But we've never talked with, the only interaction I've ever had with Julian Love was when he had that interception versus the Bears his rookie year. I was like, hey, give me an email so I could send you the clip of this. And
And did he even say anything, or did he just send the email?
He just sent the email. That was the only interaction we've ever had with Julian Love. So that was pretty cool. So who would be your most underrated? Because I think this is an award I get fired up about. And people the guy has to be underrated to me. But here's the thing, Grump, and I keep on giving disclaimers. You could look at it from the view of underrated around the league. I kind of, in my head, view it as like underrated amongst Giants fans.
Well, I'm not really sure which perspective that really. I guess this is underrated around the league, but it's very confined to this year. So I went Richie James on this one.
That's a fine answer.
Okay, so the way I see it, they attacked this offseason. They had a really, really, really tight. They had no room to wiggle with this offseason plan. They had to just come into this and make every move count. They couldn't really screw up any of their moves. They didn't have the cap space to screw up. They didn't have the draft capital to screw up. And they quite frankly, needed to be better than a 4-win team this year, or else the fan base was probably going to burn down the entire state. So they went into it, and part of their plan was to bring back Sterling Shepard, who was coming back from another injury. It was perfectly acceptable. It would be a GM move to just move on from Sterling Shepard. They brought him in and they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. And that kind of was like, well, Wan'Dale, it's going to take a little bit of time for him to acclimate to the NFL game, but Sterling Shepard offers that bridge, right? And you could see at the beginning of the year, Sterling Shepard was heavily involved. He gets hurt week 3. Wan'Dale Robinson now has to be that shifty guy and that difference maker earlier. He gets hurt in week 10, right when he is breaking out. But consistently throughout the year in the slot, Richie James remains. And by the way, I'm not even mentioning Kadarius Toney, but Richie James remains right there, plays all 17 games, and he was like the team's second leading receiver. He caught 57 passes on 70 targets, a lot of chain movers. He took a lot of heavy shots over the middle. He remained fearless. And this was a wide receiver group where if he couldn't go in weeks, I don't know, 10 through 17 into the postseason, I don't even know what we do about slot receiver if he's hurt. So to me, he was probably the most underrated.
Yeah, I mean, he had an 81% catch rate, and games where he actually played was 5 for 59, 5 for 51, 4 for 36, and then Wan'Dale came back, so he didn't get much. And then Wan'Dale went out. He came in, he had 348 in that game, 5 for 41. He was very consistent, and he was huge for Daniel Jones on third down. So yeah, I got Richie James. I think there's a lot of fine answers. So here's how the listeners, but they voted Julian Love won. I was like, Julian Love to me is not overrated or underrated by Giants fans. Isaiah Hodgins and got second, where it's like Isaiah Hodgins is not underrated by Giants
I
fans.
would say he's not even underrated by NFL fans anymore.
No,
you watch
no,
the Good Morning Football, they're talking about Isaiah Hodgins. Aaron Rodgers mentioned him by name.
Yeah, and then Graham Gano tied with him. And I was like, to me, Graham Gano's not underrated. He's just a kicker, so we don't talk about kickers a lot. I don't think that makes you underrated. It just means you're a kicker. Everyone is very high on. There's not a Giants fan who doesn't appreciate Graham Gano.
Cranky fan because he's a Knoll.
That's true. And then so the next one was most improved. Who do you have for that?
This was probably the hardest one for me. I went with, and I don't know if this is really going to be a good answer, but I went with Ben Bredeson.
That's a fine one. I went between. Okay. It was between Dex and Ben Bredeson.
Oh, I didn't even consider Dex because I had him for. Okay, yeah, I guess that's a good answer.
Ben Bredeson, I almost picked him.
He was dreadful last year, and he didn't really start this year all that good. But then I'm not even sure which game it was, but it was fairly early in the season where I finally was like, I'm not complaining about Ben Bredeson that much anymore. Like it just dawned on me because it's not like the offensive line as a whole ever really had a fantastic game. There were some games where it was like, yeah, Danny had some time back there. Maybe like the Minnesota game or something like that. Both of them. But yeah, Ben Bredeson, I'm not sure which week it was, but I ended up giving accolades to Bobby Johnson for turning Ben Bredeson into a capable starter. Whereas last year he was just, I don't know, god awful.
Yeah, he was playing you look at just efficiency numbers. He was playing the top of the league for guards and pass blocking. And this is a guy who started on the third string to start camp. Yeah, he wasn't even a backup to start camp. He was on the grass. And like you said, he was horrible last year. And he still has injury issues, but it was he had injury issues, and every time he got on the field, he sucked. He was very solid out there. Week 1 was a struggle versus the Titans.
Yeah.
But it was okay, he was clearly better than Azudu versus that front. And then he just kind of got better. He just got more comfortable in his pass blocking, was jumping defensive linemen. He was playing well as a pass blocker.
Well, actually, let me ask you this, because I know you do the O-line reports, so you'd know about this more than I would. But do you think he ever actually passed Azudu on the depth chart, or did he just get that spot when Azudu got hurt?
He did, because remember they tried to rotate the first 2 games, and then they just put Ben Bredeson in.
But then Bredeson got hurt, right? And then Azudu got the starting spot.
Yeah, and then Azudu got hurt before Bredeson even came back, and then they rotated him with Gates. Which again, they still should have just.
They should have just moved those guys to left and right guard.
Let's see. Big Blue VCR says take a peek at Tyrod Taylor's contract for 2023. I have a hard time seeing New York Giants bring him to the backup next year with DJ going to start, unless Tyrod Taylor takes a big. But I'm pretty sure all his money is guaranteed this year. Like it was all put into this year. Let me go. I'm checking Spot Rack right now.
Yeah, I think I have it open. I just got to type in Taylor.
Come on, Spot Rack, work for me. Yeah, they purposely put all the money into this year, which again is why I was a little frustrated with that contract. It's like I just don't love paying a backup quarterback that much money.
I have a hard time imagining if they move on from Tyrod Taylor next year, they're going to end up giving money to a backup quarterback. That's just like a fact, right? I mean, you can't just count on DJ to play 17 games.
But you could just pay the minimum to somebody. Like people like to hate Mike Glennon, but like you can bring in a Mike Glennon type.
Yeah.
Like look at Mike Glennon and every year before he joined the Giants. It wasn't some horrible. I mean, it was bad, but his what he did was very comparable to Tyrod Taylor. I think backup QBs are more of a. Again, there's outliers, and Tyrod Taylor, I think, is one of the 5 best backup quarterbacks in the NFL.
I think he's a perfect backup for Daniel Jones because I think he can run the same offense. He's just not going to be able to throw the ball as far downfield.
And I think he can be a little too hesitant at times.
I mean, he's not as good as DJ.
No, but here's the issue is I am just of the mindset of like, unless you're a Super Bowl contender, like I think you just got to bet on your backup QB, like your starting quarterback staying healthy. And then if he goes down, like even Colt McCoy, was Colt McCoy a good backup quarterback? No, he was horrible. But we won one game with him. The defense won him. And everyone's saying Mike Glennon is awful. No shit. He's a backup quarterback. But do you want to invest? This is where I get so mad about this, is people talking to me about how Mike Glennon is bad. Obviously. But Tyrod Taylor's not a good quarterback either. Okay? I like to spend money on guys who are going to be part of playing for the most part, unless your starting quarterback gets injured. I don't know. I'm just not big into see, like Colt got us a game. No, he didn't. Colt McCoy sucked in that Seahawks game. He was dog shit. He didn't do anything. The only 2 drives they scored on, they literally ran the ball the entire drive, and then Colt McCoy threw a little check down, a little swing pass to Alfred Morris, and he ran it in. He didn't do it. Like, he sucked. He played better in the Browns game when we scored 9 points than he did the Seahawks game.
Well, the other thing too is that like there's not even 32 good quarterbacks in the NFL, so that means that there's teams without.
I shouldn't have brought up backup quarterback because backup quarterback.
But see, this is what I'm saying.
Are the most annoying because no one listens to the point that you're making.
Yeah, but there's not even 32 good quarterbacks in the NFL. There's teams that don't have a good starter. So it is not really likely that you're going to have a backup that's like, yeah, he's actually a really good quarterback. Like, that just doesn't happen.
And if you do, you're gonna be giving him a $5.5 million a year, or Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is going to take like $8 million of our cap space next year.
I mean, you could always be the Panthers.
He might have the same cap hit as Julian Love next year.
Yeah. Yeah, the best backup quarterback in the league is still a shitty starter. So,
yeah, and again, there is outliers, but
I mean, usually they're reclamation projects, or like they're a backup because like they're like Teddy Bridgewater and they had some crazy injury and you're just not going to take a bet on it or something.
Yeah, Tyrod Taylor has a $7 million cap hit this year. If we cut him, we would save $1.4 million, and guess what? You have to replace him, so you would save no money. And he has a void year of $1.4 million. And there's incentives into it too. Like,
I think his cap hit. Oh yeah, it is $7 million. You're right.
Yeah. So like he might have the same cap hit as Julian Love on this team. You're good, Big Blue VCR. It's just backup quarterback conversations are the most annoying to me because no one listens to the point you're making. Like no one, like Tyrod Taylor is the best backup quarterback the Giants have had
since David Carr.
Yeah, and he might even be better than Dave. Like I would probably take him over David Carr. I'm not going to count 2019 where we had Eli and Daniel Jones. Neither one of those are backup.
That doesn't count.
Like he may be the best backup QB since we've had Eli Manning on the roster. Maybe Geno Smith, I guess, could be in that category.
I guess,
but nonetheless. Um, who did you have? So we did most underrated, most improved. You did Ben Brereton. Who do you have as most? And this is what happens. Everyone brings up Jeff Hostetler or Nick Foles. Who do you have for most underwhelming? Everyone brings up the outliers.
I feel like this has to be the easiest answer, right? I mean, it's like cheap to say Kenny
You
Galladay. That would be
you say
stupid.
it's the easiest answer. It was the tightest voting we've ever had in Talking Giants award history. It was separated by one vote.
I don't know how the hell it can't be Mark Lewinsky.
Neither of those. That guy, he didn't even finish top two. It was between Evan Neal and Kenny Galladay.
I don't get that. That is our only free agent move of the offseason. So like I said before, like they had to calculate every dime that they spent. They did all sorts of crazy bullshit with the practice squad to save money this year. Every single dime was accounted for. And yet this guy to them was worth 3 years, $18 million with a second year out, granted. He's due $8 million against the cap in 2023. And by the end of the year was our worst starting lineman, probably. He was supposed to be the veteran presence that was going to solidify a young, inexperienced hodgepodge group of offensive linemen. And he just kind of became the worst pass blocker of the group. I don't know how you could, if you make one free agent move all year and he's the worst starter in your group, how the hell is that not the most underwhelming thing? I mean, if anyone says Evan Neal, I think you're just putting too expectations on a rookie.
But here's the thing: is Evan Neal didn't get better. And
I get that.
people will compare him to Andrew Thomas.
But
Andrew
they
Thomas
have
was
different
voted Rookie of the
issues.
Year by our listeners. You know, like Andrew Thomas's rookie year was a success.
I would agree with that.
It was a success. He started bad, grew, and by the end of the year, he was like a solid to good left tackle.
But also, I thought
Evan
Andrew
Neal,
Thomas was a better tackle coming out of Georgia than Evan Neal was coming out of Alabama. And
I
also,
agree.
that first game against Pittsburgh that Andrew Thomas had, I don't think he played bad. I think a lot of his badness in that first year was adjusting to a new scheme, a new blocking scheme, and dealing with NFL talent, taking advantage of every tiny little thing that you give them. So he struggled with dealing with inside pressure, but that was just one part of his thing that he just kind of had to adjust to. And even by the end of that first year, he looked right back to where he was in college, and he was just going to keep getting better. Evan Neal has different issues.
That's the worry, though, is Evan Neal's issues are like he can be a little top heavy. He's playing from behind. Where it's like it was never like the speed of, well, I guess it was a little speed, like guys beating him inside with Thomas. But like Thomas got good when he realized, like, oh, I'm athletic. Like I can cheat inside and just wash these guys around the corner. Neal doesn't have that. And there's only one game of Evan Neal where it's like, this is just really good ball, and it was the Ravens. And JPP was totally washed when he was going up against him. I actually voted Kenny Galladay, and it's not because I had huge expectations for Kenny Galladay. But Galladay led the Giants from receiving in 2021. He was a good, not great wide receiver. And in a bad wide receiver room, he didn't even play injustifiably. Like he gave us 0. So that's why I voted Kenny Galladay. And I had higher expectations than most of the fan base for him in training camp. You know, and he was their wide receiver 1 all of training camp. You know, like who had the most catches from Daniel Jones in training camp? It was Kenny Galladay. But we just got nothing. Also, YouTube user makes a great point. A lot of times people will bring up Eric Flowers. Eric Flowers was extremely lazy, and like Evan Neal is not. So that's why it's even if Evan Neal doesn't work out, you can't compare him to Eric Flowers because Eric Flowers was just one. He was nowhere near the prospect, and he was a lazy person.
Every time I think about like that draft night and I just really just go through my head of all the Eric Flowers memories, I get like really angry. It's like, you know, those things with like movies where people are holding a glass and it shatters. I'm like pretty sure that would happen because on draft night, I really couldn't believe that those rumors were true. And we really took him. And I was like, this guy sucks. This is going to be terrible. And lo and behold, I was right.
I remember he had like a good PFF grade, like on Sunday Night Football Week 3. It's like this.
That makes sense.
I went to the Giants Dolphins game his rookie year, and I like posted a play on Instagram if you want to go back and find it. And Evan Neal's getting knocked on his ass in that play. All right, so you got Glowinski for most underwhelming. Glowinski took 3rd, but Neal and Galladay got more votes than him. So what is rookie of the year? Did you go cave on, or did you want to talk about the value of Daniel Bellinger?
Wow, that's funny. Those were the two guys that I was going between, obviously, because just about everybody else got hurt or is just has room to grow, which is Evan Neal, Cordell Flott. I went Kayvon. But I think if Bellinger didn't get hurt, he might have gotten the vote.
Yeah, very, very. I mean,
which isn't his fault either.
I went Kayvon too, but like because Kayvon just had games where like he was like a total difference maker. Where Bellinger is a difference maker, is like what he does is extremely valuable, but it's like we're not going like, who freaking made a huge impact and won this game? Daniel Bellinger. He does his job. That's what I want out of a tight end, obviously, but he did well. I was sneezing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Daniel Bellinger. Here's the thing. I like Daniel Bellinger. I think he's a great draft pick for us. I think he's going to be a big part of the offense. And yet we're still going into next year, and I'm like, I kind of want a tight end, but I don't really have those like.
Daniel Bellinger is not going to stop you from drafting a tight end, basically.
Correct. Yeah. He's not like a mega. He's not George Kittle out there.
Even if Daniel Bellinger's our backup to if we get a tight end, like that is still going to be look back as a very solid draft pick. Like I feel very confident. Like Daniel Bellinger, awesome draft pick. We took him in the top of the 4th, I believe.
Yeah.
Even if he's not this great receiving threat, and I think he can grow a little bit as a receiver too. Like Daniel Bellinger was a slam dunk 4th round pick. Easily from after year 1, the best day 3 pick. I mean, again, he's taking 2nd in rookie of the year, so that makes sense.
I don't know.
And I like to have 2 tight ends who can block, and if one can be a receiver, then more of a receiving threat, that's sick. Or if
that's kind of what I was going to ask
you,
can
be more of a receiver, like that's sick too.
So like going into this draft, if you're looking at tight ends, I don't know. I'm assuming you didn't look at tight ends yet, but is there like a specific trait, style, kind of tight end that you are looking for specifically? Or do you think Bellinger's well-roundedness allows them to kind of take whatever is best?
I do think Bellinger's well-rounded, like ability to do everything decent helps, where you can maybe take a swing on one of these, guys who's maybe not the best blocker. But I still go back at the end of the day. It's like I just want my tight ends to be able to block because I want them to be able to be on the field no matter what the situation and not to be a negative. Like Dalton Kincaid was brought up. We talked about him in that way too early draft preview we did. I can't remember about his blocking, but I remember like being very impressed with him. I'm going to watch the ones at the Senior Bowl. Is there anybody at the Senior Bowl that you've looked at that you're excited about?
Yes. Let me pull it up really quick. I did just this morning watch Luke Musgrave, which I saw somebody in the chat say. And he's really interesting because he only played 2 games in 2022. He got hurt in like the last play against Fresno State, but he has all of the tools. Like he looks ready. He looks like a tight end. He just needs to add a little bit of muscle. I think he has the willingness to be a blocker. He gets good leverage and stuff. He just needs NFL coaching, I think. So the Senior Bowl, I think, is going to be huge. We might even see him improve from Monday to Friday or Tuesday to Friday. You know what I mean? So he's my main guy, but obviously Dalton Kincaid is another person. And there is,
who is someone if we did like splurge on a player that I would love to splurge on,
like free agency splurge?
Yeah.
I don't even know who's on the market.
Dalton Schultz. I really like.
I would
Dalton
take him.
Schultz. He is one of my favorite. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the league.
I think Payne Durham maybe too, from Purdue. That kid.
Yeah, I'm going to watch the tight ends. I'm going to kind of speed watch them before I can't. I'm doing full evals on O-line, D-line before we go, and then I'm going to speed watch tight ends and wide receivers. Linebackers, I'm not focused as much as linebacker is a number 1 focus for me in the draft. If you notice,
the Senior Bowl, it's kind of not really.
It's hard to watch them at the Senior Bowl. Like they just kind of get lost in the wash. You don't have great views of what they're doing. Like linebacker is very much like a position you got to watch on film. Like, is he playing the right gap? Like just because a guy gets blocked doesn't mean he's not doing his job, type of thing.
Well,
their one-on-one drills are covering running backs one-on-one, which is like it's like an impossible ask for them.
But even the 11-on-11 stuff is like we were saying this last year. It's like they know that they're running. That's like 80% of being a good linebacker is diagnosing that as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So they're just coming downhill at full speed as soon as the ball snapped is really not testing what I need to see from them.
Yeah. Yeah. So linebacker, as much as linebacker is actually my favorite, maybe my favorite position to watch. But it's like at the Senior Bowl, it's hard to get a diagnosis of if they're playing well or not.
I would agree with that. I think it's a lot of fun to watch linebacker play and safety play.
Yeah. Watching them the actual Senior Bowl game helps. By the way, remember actually never mind. I was gonna bring up Troy Anderson. Did you like Troy Anderson last year? He was the guy who's the D1 AA guy who switched from Montana State, switched from quarterback to running back to linebacker.
No, I didn't have I had a whatever grade on him.
He was the player that made me the most mad because everyone talked about how great he was and his athleticism, and I went and watched him, and he sucked. Like in the national championship game versus North Dakota State, their game plan was to just
let him run crazy,
just run at him every single game. He did have 69 tackles this year.
Nice.
3 tackles, but again, you can't judge a linebacker off of tackles. 0 sacks.
Well, definitely not. No, because like didn't.
I mean, if you're a starting linebacker, you're going to get
like John Beeson had like our like he was like our tackle leader.
Tay Crowder had a lot of tackles last year. Jalen Smith has so yeah.
So you're super down on Tay Crowder, right?
No, I was. I mean, he's not good. I was actually one of the people being like he should play over Jalen Smith.
Yeah, to me, it felt like he was. It just felt like I don't know if he was guessing or if he was just still learning how to diagnose stuff. But like he would jump gaps and he would be correct, and then other times he would just jump the complete wrong gap and then be terrible.
Yeah, no, he definitely wasn't good, but he was not much better. He was better than Jalen Smith, and I thought it was very noticeable. And then he had the tweet afterwards, and that was kind of the end of it for him. So I'm rooting for him.
But he's still in the roster now, right?
With the Steelers.
Oh, I thought we signed him to the practice squad.
No. Quincy Roche decided to sign with the Steelers instead of futures with the Giants too, which obviously was smart of him. Yeah. Let's see. All right, we'll go for a couple more minutes. Get us some last second questions. I know we opened up the draft.
Well, let's talk about wide receiver for a little bit because we're going to be at the Senior Bowl. I know you didn't watch them yet, but I can speak to this a little bit. But
yeah, give us one guy and I'll watch him.
One guy? Oh, I don't know if he's going to be at the Senior Bowl. Hang on, give me 2 seconds. But
okay.
I think I told you Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State will be there, and I know like a month or two ago we talked about him. As soon as he like committed to the Senior Bowl, I sent it to you.
Yeah, I haven't watched him yet. Justin put a clip of him today. So
yeah?
I think when I do watch wide receivers, he'll probably be the first one I watch. Him and like Rashee Rice.
I mean, my favorite one right now, and I obviously haven't watched everybody, and he's not going to be at the Senior Bowl, but is because he's a junior, the USC kid,
Jordan Addison.
Jordan Addison.
I see everybody mocking him to the Giants.
It's not even about. He's just a really, really well polished wide receiver. He's fantastic. But as far as the Senior Bowl goes,
you and Joe are on like great wavelengths. Like he was the one who brought up Luke Musgrave, and now he's talking about Jordan Addison.
Joe, get at me on Twitter. Talk to me. Send me DMs. Tell me who to watch. Seriously. I really also like, and I don't think they're going to do it because he's on the shorter side, but the kid from Houston, Dell.
I don't even know who that
Nathaniel Dell. He's 5'10". That's like his big issue, but I could see him in this offense doing a whole lot. I would check him out if I were you, and he's going to be at the Senior Bowl. So put him as number 2 on your plane trip watch on the laptop or whatever.
Sounds good. Let me I'm putting the link to your podcast in the chat again. Make sure to go subscribe to the Just Giants podcast. I mean, I'm assuming we will be on it next week. From the Senior Bowl, you will be a guest co-host for Talking Giants next week. So we got to get us on Just Giants next week. So make sure to go subscribe. We're going to live stream every day from the Senior Bowl. We're going to live stream too. So Grump will be joining us for that.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun last year.
Yeah, prep right now kind of sucks. So I'm just kind of ready to be there.
Oh, dude, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. and doing a player before clocking in for work at 8 a.m. It sucks.
So I flew back Monday from New York, and I was second person in the office after John Boy and got 2 players in before my flight. So I'm right there with you. Like Friday, I just need to go and watch and get like 60 evaluations done on Senior Bowl guys. So we out here grinding for you guys. So we'll be out the Senior Bowl. Very fun trip. So subscribe to his podcast. Obviously, you guys know where to find Talking Giants. We appreciate you guys. I think we're gonna try and do weekly live streams. Obviously, next week we'll do 3 because we're at the Senior Bowl. But after that, trying maybe Wednesday nights. Wednesday nights are nice and slow. They're separated from both podcasts well enough. So, and remember, if you want to ask questions, do not ask us about Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley's contract because we are not going to do that every live stream.
No, save your backup QB questions for Bobby.
Yes. Backup QB conversation. I'm telling you, they get me heated. Like I don't get heated about much topics, even if people disagree with me. The backup, it's just because it's not because I disagree with people disagree with me. It's that nobody listens to the point. All right, see you guys. We'll have a podcast out Friday. We're gonna have an interview with somebody very special on it. We'll see you then. Until then, let's go Big Blue.
Let's go Giants.